Commander Vexthara Cole stood on the bridge of his flagship, the dreadnought Kolvash. His 6 eyes studied the blue planet that hung in the darkness of space before him. Earth looked peaceful from this distance, small, weak, just another world. Waiting to be conquered. The Krillian Empire had taken over 847 worlds. Earth would be number 848. Vexthara had done this many times before. His fleet of 200 ships had never failed to bring victory to the Empire. The pattern was always the same. Show up, demand surrender. When they refused, destroy their defenses. Land troops, game over. "Sir, we are receiving a transmission from the planet," reported his communication officer, a young Krillian named Zektar. "It through," Vexthara said. He expected to hear the usual begging, maybe some threats. The primitive species always tried to sound tough at first, but the screen flickered to life. A human male appeared, wearing what looked like a military uniform. He had short dark hair and calm brown eyes. Behind him, Vexthara could see other humans working at control stations. "This is Captain Jake Martinez of the Earth Defense Force, commanding the battleship Terra's Shield. You are in violation of Earth space. State your business here." Vexthara almost laughed. The human spoke like he had any power in this situation, like his tiny fleet could actually stop the mighty Krillian. "Armada. I am Commander Vexthara Cole of the 47th Subjugation Fleet. Your world now belongs to the Krillian Empire. Surrender immediately, and your people will be treated as workers, not slaves." The human named Jake Martinez did not look afraid. He did not beg. He simply nodded. "I understand. We refuse." "Then you will be destroyed," Vexthara said. "We know," Jake replied. "But we will make you pay for every inch of space you take." The transmission ended. Vexthara stared at the dark screen. Something felt wrong. The human had accepted death too easily. Most species fought because they believed they could win. This human knew he would lose, yet he still chose to fight. "Sir, our scouts report the human fleet is moving into defensive positions," reported his tactical officer. "They have roughly 50 ships. All of them are smaller than our destroyers." Vexthara studied the tactical display. The human ships were arranging themselves in a strange pattern. They were not forming the typical defensive wall that most species used. Instead, they seemed to be creating multiple small groups scattered across the system. "Unusual formation," he muttered. "Begin the attack. Target their largest ships first." The battle began as the Krillian fleet advanced. The humans opened fire with primitive kinetic weapons and basic energy cannons. Their shots barely scratched the shields of the Krillian ships. It should have been a massacre, but something strange happened. When the first human ship was destroyed, the other ships did not retreat. Instead, they seemed to fight harder. The damaged human vessel, a destroyer called the Liberty, suddenly changed course and rammed directly into a Krillian cruiser. Both ships exploded in a ball of fire. "They used their own ship as a weapon," whispered the tactical officer. "Desperate." "Move," Vexthara said. But he felt a chill run down his spine. The human had sacrificed his entire crew just to take out one enemy ship. That was not normal behavior. The battle continued for 6 hours. The humans fought with a fury that Vexthara had never seen before. When their weapons stopped working, they rammed enemy ships. When their ships were boarded, they fought hand to hand until the last human was dead. They never surrendered. They never ran. The worst moment came when a group of human Marines was trapped on Luna Station, a small base on Earth's moon. They were led by a sergeant named Paul Johnson. Vexthara watched through his ship's cameras as the Krillian soldiers surrounded the human position. "Surrender, humans," called the Krillian commander through his speaker. "You cannot win." Paul Johnson appeared on the communication screen. He was bleeding from a cut on his forehead, but he was smiling. "You want this station? Come and take it." The Krillian soldiers moved in for the final assault. That was when Paul Johnson detonated the station's reactor core. The explosion was visible from space, a bright flash that lit up the dark side of the moon. The blast destroyed the entire station and took out the Krillian dreadnought that was positioned nearby. Vexthara felt his blood turn cold. The humans had killed themselves just to destroy one of his ships. They had chosen death over surrender. "Sir," reported the communication officer, "we are receiving strange transmissions from the human fleet. They appear to be broadcasting something to our crews." "What kind of transmissions?" "Music, sir, and voices speaking in our language. They seem to know our names." Vexthara frowned. How could the humans know Krillian names? They had never met his species before this day. The battle ended with human defeat, as expected, but the victory felt hollow. Vexthara had lost 3 ships and over 2,000 soldiers. The humans had lost their entire fleet, but they had made the Krillians pay dearly for their victory. As his ships moved toward Earth for the next phase of the invasion, Vexthara could not shake the feeling that something was very wrong. The humans had fought like no species he had ever encountered. They seemed to welcome death as long as they could take enemies with them. His communication officer appeared at his side. "Sir, we are receiving reports from the boarding parties. The human ships are empty, except for the dead. But, sir, the bodies are arranged in strange patterns, and there are messages written on the walls." "What kind of messages?" "Personal messages, sir, addressed to specific members of our crews. They know things about us that should be impossible for them to know." Vexthara stared at the planet below. What kind of enemy was he facing? The humans had lost this battle, but somehow he felt like they had won something else. Something that made his skin crawl with fear. The invasion of Earth had just begun, and already Vexthara was starting to understand why this would be the worst campaign of his military career. 3 weeks had passed since the first battle, and Vexthara was beginning to understand that this would not be like other conquests. The humans had turned their entire solar system into a maze of death traps. Every asteroid, every space station, every piece of floating debris seemed to hide an ambush. Admiral Karen Foster commanded the remaining human defense forces from a hidden base somewhere in the asteroid belt. Her voice had become familiar to every Krillian soldier as she broadcast daily messages to the invasion fleet. But these were not the usual propaganda messages that most species used. These were personal. "Good morning, Vexthara," her voice came through the ship's speakers. "Did you sleep well? I hope you did not dream of your clutch mother again. I know those dreams have been troubling you since you left the homeworld." Vexthara nearly dropped his morning nutrition tube. How did she know about his dreams? How did she know about his clutch mother? That information was not in any file that humans could access. "Sir," his communication officer said nervously, "she has been doing this for days. She knows personal details about many of our crew members. Things that should be impossible for her to know. The siege of Luna had become a nightmare. The human survivors on the moon's surface refused to surrender. They had turned the mining tunnels into a maze of booby traps and ambush points. Every time Krillian soldiers thought they had cleared a section, more humans would appear from hidden passages. Lieutenant Commander Steve Harper led one of the human resistance cells. He had been a mining engineer before the war, and he knew every tunnel on Luna like the back of his hand. His team had converted mining equipment into weapons, turning excavation charges into bombs and drilling lasers into guns. "We have located Harper's position," reported the ground commander. "He is trapped in Section 7 with 12 other humans. We can finish them." "Do it," Vexthara ordered. But something in his gut told him this was another trap. the Krillian. Soldiers moved in carefully, checking every corner. They found Harper and his team in a large mining chamber, surrounded by mining equipment and supply crates. The humans had their hands raised in surrender. "Finally," the ground commander said. "Secure the prisoners." But as the Krillian soldiers moved forward, Harper smiled. "Tell me something," he said calmly. "Do you know what mining charges are designed to do?" The ground commander realized the trap too late. The entire chamber was rigged with explosives. Harper had turned the mining equipment into one giant bomb. The explosion collapsed 3 levels of the mining complex and destroyed 2 Krillian dropships that were hovering nearby. Steve Harper died in the explosion, along with his entire team. But they had taken over 100 Krillian soldiers with them. "They keep doing this," the ground commander reported later. "Every time we corner them, they kill themselves and take as many of us as possible. It is like they want to die." But Vexthara was beginning to understand that it was not about wanting to die. The humans were fighting a different kind of war. They were not trying to win in the traditional sense. They were trying to break his army's spirit. The psychological warfare was getting worse. Commander Rita Blake, a human specialist in what they called psychops, had somehow obtained detailed files on Krillian culture and psychology. She knew exactly which buttons to push to cause maximum emotional damage. "Attention soldiers of the 47th Fleet," Rita's voice came through the ship's communication system. "This is Commander Rita Blake. I want to talk to you about home. I want to talk about the families you left behind. I want to talk about the little ones who will never understand why Daddy never came home." The message was broadcast on all frequencies. Every Krillian soldier in the fleet heard it. But it was not just the words that were disturbing. It was the fact that Rita Blake seemed to know specific details about individual soldiers. "Zektar," she said, addressing Vexthara's communication officer directly, "your clutch sibling Marthik is about to have her first spawning. You were supposed to be there for the ceremony. She has been asking about you. She wonders if you are still alive." Zektar went pale. His hands shook as he tried to maintain his composure. "Sir, how does she know about my clutch sibling? How does she know about the spawning ceremony?" Vexthara had no answer. The humans seemed to know everything about his soldiers, their families, their fears, their hopes and dreams. It was impossible, but it was happening. The worst incident occurred when a human infiltration team managed to board the cruiser Sharp Talon. The team was led by Colonel Tony Walsh, a former intelligence officer who had volunteered for what everyone knew was a suicide mission. The humans did not try to destroy the ship. They did not steal intelligence or sabotage the engines. Instead, they did something far more disturbing. They rearranged personal belongings in the crew quarters. They left childhood photos of Krillian families in strategic locations throughout the ship. They programmed the ship's speakers to play lullabies from the Krillian homeworld at random intervals. When the security team finally cornered Walsh and his men, they found them sitting calmly in the ship's mess hall, drinking Krillian tea and eating Krillian food. "How did you know about our culture?" a security chief demanded. "How did you know which foods we eat? How did you know our lullabies?" Walsh looked up from his tea and smiled. "We have been watching you. We have been learning. We know more about you than you know about yourselves." The security chief shot Walsh and his team, but the damage was done. The crew of the Sharp Talon began experiencing what the medical officers could only describe as existential vertigo. They felt watched, even when they were alone. They felt homesick, in a way that made them physically ill. Several crew members requested transfer to other ships, claiming they could not sleep in their quarters anymore. "Sir," the medical officer reported, "we are seeing similar symptoms throughout the fleet. The humans are not just fighting us physically. They are fighting us psychologically. They are somehow attacking our minds." Vixthara stood on his bridge, staring at the planet Earth. The blue world looked peaceful, but he knew it was full of humans who were studying his every move, learning his weaknesses, finding ways to crawl inside his soldiers' heads. "Sir," his tactical officer reported, "3 more ships have requested permission to withdraw from the front lines. Their crews claim they are compromised." "Denied," Vexthara said. But he understood their fear. He felt it too. The humans were not just fighting a war. They were conducting some kind of massive psychological experiment, and his army was the test subject. The siege of Luna continued, but Vexthara was beginning to realize that the humans had already won something more important than any battle. They had gotten inside his soldiers' heads. They had made them afraid of an enemy that should have been helpless dot, and the worst part was that Vexthara had no idea how they were doing it. The human resistance had evolved into something that defied all military logic. Captain Ben Rodriguez led a small unit of survivors who seemed to know what the Krillians would do before they did it. They were not using normal fighting tactics anymore. They were using the Krillians' own minds against them. Vexthara watched the security footage from the latest incident. Rodriguez and his team had infiltrated a Krillian supply depot on one of Jupiter's moons. They had not stolen supplies or blown up the facility. Instead, they had left gifts. The gifts were arranged carefully throughout the depot. Personal items from the Krillian homeworld, childhood toys, traditional foods, family photographs. But these were not random items. Each gift was specifically chosen for individual Krillian soldiers. "They left this for you, sir," a supply sergeant said, handing Vexthara a small carved figure. It was a spawning fish, made from blue coral, exactly like the one his clutch mother had given him when he joined the military. Vexthara felt his blood turn cold. This was impossible. The toy had been destroyed years ago in a fire on the homeworld. No human could have known about it. Yet here it was, carved perfectly down to the smallest detail. "Where did they get this?" he demanded. "We do not know, sir. But every soldier in the depot received something personal, things from their past, things that only they would recognize." Dr. Amy Chun was leading the Human Psychological Warfare program. She had been a xenobiologist before the war, studying alien cultures and behaviors. Now she was using that knowledge to wage war on the Krillian mind. Her team had somehow obtained detailed psychological profiles of every Krillian soldier in the fleet. They knew about childhood traumas, family relationships, cultural fears, and personal phobias. They used this information to create targeted psychological attacks. "Attention Krillian warriors," Dr. Chun's voice came through the ship's communication system. "This is Dr. Amy Chun. I want to talk to you about fear, not the fear of death, which you have been trained to overcome. I want to talk about the deeper fears, the fear of being forgotten, the fear of dying alone, far from the spawning grounds where your ancestors rest." The message was accompanied by images that appeared on every screen throughout the fleet. Images of Krillian burial grounds, images of family ceremonies, images of home. But these were not just any images. They were specific to each ship, each crew, each individual soldier. Somehow, the humans had accessed the personal photo collections of every Krillian in the fleet. "Sir," the communication officer reported, "we are receiving reports of psychological breakdown throughout the fleet. Soldiers are refusing to leave their quarters. Some are reporting hallucinations. Others are claiming they can hear voices of dead family members." The worst incident occurred when Colonel Tony Walsh's replacement, a human named Major Dan Cooper, led a team to infiltrate the heavy cruiser Iron Fist. Cooper had been a psychologist before the war, and he understood how to manipulate minds. Infiltration team did not try to fight the Krillian crew. Instead, They performed what they called a psychological reconstruction of the ship. They rearranged furniture to match the layout of Krillian homes. They programmed the lighting to simulate the natural light cycles of the Krillian homeworld. They filled the air with scents that reminded the crew of their childhood. When the security team found Cooper and his men, they were sitting in the ship's common area, surrounded by holographic displays showing scenes from the Krillian homeworld. The humans had somehow accessed the personal memory banks of the ship's computer system. "How did you get access to our personal files?" the security chief demanded. Cooper looked up calmly. "We did not need to access your files. We simply watched you. We listened to you. We learned to understand what you miss most about home." The security chief shot Cooper, but the damage was done. The crew of the Iron Fist began experiencing what the medical officers called acute homesickness syndrome. They became unable to perform their duties. They spent their time staring at the holographic displays, lost in memories of home. "Sir," the ship's captain reported, "my crew is compromised. They are not responding to orders. They seem to be in some kind of trance." Vexthara ordered the Iron Fist to withdraw from the front lines. It was the fifth ship he had lost to psychological warfare. The humans were not destroying his fleet with weapons. They were destroying it with kindness and understanding. The psychological attacks were becoming more sophisticated. Lieutenant Sarah Murphy, a human intelligence officer, had developed a new tactic. She would broadcast personal messages to individual Krillian soldiers, but the messages were not threats or propaganda. They were expressions of sympathy and understanding. "I know you are tired, Vexthara," she said in a private transmission. "I know you miss your clutch mother. I know you dream about the spawning grounds and wonder if you will ever see them again. I know you are afraid that your soldiers will die for nothing, far from home." The message was perfectly accurate. Vexthara did miss his clutch mother. He did dream about the spawning grounds. He was afraid that his soldiers would die for nothing. But how could a human understand these feelings? How could an alien species comprehend the deepest fears of a Krillian warrior? "Sir," his medical officer reported, "we are seeing an epidemic of what the humans call existential crisis. Our soldiers are questioning the purpose of the war. They are wondering if the Empire is worth dying for. They are asking why they left their families to fight on a distant world." These were dangerous questions. Questions that could destroy military discipline. Questions that could lead to mutiny. The breakthrough came when the humans captured a Krillian communication relay station. The station contained detailed psychological profiles of every species in the Krillian Empire. The humans had not just learned about Krillian psychology. They had learned about the psychology of every race the Empire had conquered. They are not just fighting us, Vexthara realized. They are studying us. They are learning how to understand and manipulate any alien mind they encounter. The implications were terrifying. The humans were not just defending their world. They were preparing for something much larger. They were learning how to wage psychological warfare against any species they might encounter in the future. "Sir," the tactical officer reported, "we are receiving a general broadcast from the planet. It is addressed to the entire fleet." The message came from a human named Captain Joe Miller. He was standing in what looked like a command center, surrounded by other humans who were working at computer terminals. "Greetings, warriors of the Krillian Empire," Miller said calmly. "We want you to know that we understand you. We know why you are here. We know what you are fighting for. We know what you fear." The message was accompanied by a data stream that contained detailed psychological profiles of every Krillian soldier in the fleet. The humans had somehow analyzed the behavior patterns, communication habits, and personal histories of every individual in the invasion force. "We are not your enemies," Miller continued. "We are simply beings who want to live in peace. But if you continue to threaten our world We will defend ourselves, and we will use every tool at our disposal, including the tool of understanding. The transmission ended, but the message was clear. The humans were not just defending their planet. They were demonstrating their ability to understand and influence alien minds on a massive scale. Vexthara stared at the tactical display, watching his fleet spread across the solar system. Half of his ships were reporting psychological casualties. His soldiers were afraid to fight an enemy that understood them better than they understood themselves. The madness was spreading, and Vexthara was beginning to realize that the humans had already won the war. They had just not told him yet. Vexthara stood in his command center, staring at the tactical display. Half of his fleet was reporting psychological casualties. His soldiers were afraid to fight an enemy that seemed to know them better than they knew themselves. The invasion was falling apart, and he had to make a desperate choice. "Prepare for full planetary assault," he ordered. "All ships, all troops, we end this today." General Rick Stone and Admiral Nancy Parker were waiting for him. The human defense forces had retreated to Earth's surface, but Vexthara knew this was not surrender. This was preparation for what the humans called the final gambit. As the Krillian dropships descended through Earth's atmosphere, Vexthara expected to see cities full of humans preparing for their last stand. Instead, he found empty streets and abandoned buildings. The human population had disappeared. "Sir," reported the ground commander, "the cities are empty. We are detecting massive underground installations, but the surface is deserted except for small groups of humans in key locations." "How many humans remain on the surface?" "Approximately 3,000, sir. They are led by Captain Joe Miller and Major Susan Clark. They are not engaging in combat. They are simply broadcasting." The broadcasts had started the moment the Krillian forces landed. But these were not the usual military communications. These were personal messages directed at individual Krillian soldiers. Messages that should have been impossible for any human to know. "Greetings, Zektar," a human voice said through the communication system. "This is Captain Joe Miller. I want to talk to you about your clutch sibling Northic. She had her spawning ceremony last week. It was beautiful. She asked the ancestors to protect you and bring you home safely." Zektar, Vexthara as communication officer, went pale. "Sir, how do they know about the ceremony? How do they know what she said?" The personal messages continued for every soldier in the landing force. The humans knew about family events, childhood memories, personal fears, and secret hopes. They knew things that should have been impossible for any alien species to know. "Tell me, Vexthara," a female voice said. It was Admiral Nancy Parker speaking directly to him. "Do you still dream of your clutch mother singing? Do you still remember the song she sang when you were afraid of the dark?" Vexthara felt his hands shake. His clutch mother had sung that song to him 50 years ago. No recording existed. No file contained that information. Yet somehow this human knew about it. "How?" he whispered. "Because we have been watching you," Nancy Parker continued. "We have been learning about you. We have been studying every word you speak, every gesture you make, every emotion you express. We know you better than you know yourself." The ground assault continued, but something was wrong. The human defenders were not fighting in the traditional sense. They were not using weapons or tactics. They were using knowledge. Captain Joe Miller led a group of humans who had positioned themselves in what used to be New York City. They were not hiding or running. They were standing in the open, broadcasting continuously to the Krillian forces. "We know you are tired," Miller said calmly. "We know you miss your families. We know you wonder why you are fighting a war so far from home. We know you are afraid that you will die here, forgotten and alone." The Krillian soldiers who heard these messages began to slow down. Some stopped advancing entirely. Others sat down where they were, overwhelmed by homesickness and existential dread. "Sir," the ground commander reported, "my troops are not responding to orders. They are experiencing some kind of psychological paralysis. They seem to be lost in their own thoughts." Major Susan Clark was leading a similar operation in what used to be London. Her team had somehow obtained detailed psychological profiles of every Krillian soldier in the invasion force. They knew exactly which emotional buttons to push to cause maximum psychological damage. "I understand your pain," she said in a broadcast, directed at the entire Krillian army. "I understand what it feels like to be far from home, fighting for a cause that seems meaningless. I understand the loneliness and the fear and the doubt." The words were simple, but they hit the Krillian soldiers like physical blows. These were the thoughts they had been trying to suppress, the feelings they had been trained to ignore, the fears they had been taught to overcome. But the humans were not just expressing these feelings, they were validating them. They were saying that it was okay to feel homesick, okay to question the war, okay to want to go home. "Sir," the medical officer reported, "we are seeing massive psychological breakdown throughout the invasion force. Soldiers are refusing to advance. Some are requesting immediate evacuation. Others are asking to surrender." Vexthara realized that the humans had turned the invasion into a therapy session. They were not fighting as soldiers. They were counseling them. They were helping them confront their deepest fears and emotions. The climax came when Lieutenant Lara Foster, daughter of the human admiral, began broadcasting a message that somehow reached every Krillian soldier simultaneously. The message was not transmitted through normal communication channels. It seemed to come from inside their own minds. "I see you," Lara said softly. "I see your pain. I see your fear. I see your loneliness. I see the child you used to be before you became a soldier. I see the dreams you had before the war. I see the person you really are underneath the uniform and the training." The message was accompanied by images that appeared directly in the minds of the Krillian soldiers. Images of their childhood homes, images of their families, images of peaceful moments from their past. "You are not just soldiers," Lavra continued. "You are individuals with hopes and dreams and fears. You are sons and daughters and parents and friends. You are living beings who deserve to be happy and loved and understood." The psychological impact was devastating. Across the entire invasion force, Krillian soldiers began to break down. They were not crying from sadness. They were crying from relief. Relief at finally being understood by someone who cared about them as individuals. "Sir," the ground commander reported, "the invasion is over. My troops are laying down their weapons. They are asking to go home." Vexthara stared at the tactical display, watching as his entire invasion force effectively surrendered without firing a shot. The humans had not defeated them with superior weapons or tactics. They had defeated them with empathy and understanding. "How did they do this?" he demanded. "We have been studying you since the moment you arrived, Admiral Nancy," Parker said, her voice coming through the main communication system. "We have been learning about your psychology, your culture, your individual personalities. We have been preparing for this moment. But how? How could you possibly understand us so well?" "Because understanding is what humans do best," Nancy replied. "We are a species that thrives on empathy and connection. We instinctively try to understand other minds, even alien ones. It is our greatest strength and our most powerful weapon." Vexthara realized that the humans had not just won this battle. They had demonstrated something far more terrifying than any military victory. They had shown that they could understand and influence any alien mind they encountered. The invasion was over, but the war for the galaxy's psychological future had just begun. The retreat from Earth was unlike anything in Krillian military history. For the first time in the Empire's existence, a subjugation fleet was withdrawing without achieving victory. Vexthara stood on the bridge of his flagship, watching the blue planet shrink in the distance. His entire invasion force was leaving, but they were not the same soldiers who had arrived. "Sir," his medical officer reported, "we have over 15,000 soldiers requesting psychological counseling. They are experiencing what they call existential awakening. They are questioning their purpose, their loyalty, their entire understanding of reality." Vexthara nodded grimly. The humans had not just defeated his army. They had fundamentally changed it. His soldiers were no longer simple warriors following orders. They had become thinking, feeling individuals who questioned everything. The humans did not pursue the retreating fleet. They simply watched from their hidden bases as the Krillian ships limped away from the solar system. There was no celebration, no victory speeches. The humans seemed to understand that this was not really an ending. It was a beginning. "Commander Vexthara," a familiar voice came through the communication system. It was Admiral Nancy Parker, speaking from Earth. "We want you to know that we harbor no ill will toward you or your people. We understand that you are following orders, doing what you believed was right." Vexthara found himself responding before he could stop himself. "How can you understand us? How can you forgive us? We came to destroy your world." "Because understanding is what we do," Nancy replied. "We are a species that believes in the power of empathy and connection. We know that every individual, even our enemies, has a story worth understanding." As the fleet traveled back toward Krillian space, Vexthara began to piece together what had really happened. The humans had not just been defending their world. They had been conducting the largest psychological study in galactic history. Every battle, every skirmish, every captured soldier had been part of a massive research project. The humans had been studying their attackers, learning about Krillian psychology, culture, and individual personalities. They had turned the invasion into a learning experience. "Sir," his intelligence officer reported, "we have analyzed the human broadcasts and psychological warfare techniques. They demonstrate a level of understanding of alien psychology that should be impossible for a species that has never encountered other intelligent life." How did they do it? They used our own behavior against us. Every word we spoke, every action we took, every emotion we expressed was analyzed and cataloged. They built detailed psychological profiles of our entire species based on our own behavior patterns. Vexthara realized the terrifying truth. The humans had not defeated the Krillian Empire through superior technology or military might. They had defeated them by understanding them. They had weaponized empathy itself. "Sir," the communication officer said nervously, "we are receiving a final transmission from Earth. It is addressed to you personally." The message came from a human named Dr. Amy Chin, the xenobiologist who had led the psychological warfare program. She appeared on the screen, sitting in what looked like a research laboratory. "Commander Vexthara," she said calmly, "I want you to understand what happened here. This was not just a military campaign. It was a demonstration. We wanted to show you, and through you the entire galaxy, what humans are capable of when we put our minds to understanding others." She paused, looking directly at the camera. "We studied you not because we wanted to hurt you, but because we wanted to understand you. We learned about your culture, your psychology, your individual personalities. We discovered that underneath your military training and imperial conditioning, you are not so different from us." The implications were staggering. The humans had not just studied the Krillians. They had studied the psychology of war itself. They had learned how to understand and influence any alien mind they encountered. "The galaxy is about to change," Dr. Chung continued. "Species that have been enemies for thousands of years are going to discover that they have more in common than they thought. Wars that have raged for centuries are going to end not through violence, but through understanding. Vexthara felt a chill run down his spine. The humans were not just talking about ending the war with the Krillian Empire. They were talking about ending all wars everywhere by making it impossible for species to hate what they truly understood. "Sir," the tactical officer reported, "we are detecting strange energy signatures from the Earth system. They appear to be broadcasting something into deep space." Vexthara studied the readings. The humans were transmitting powerful signals in all directions, reaching far beyond their solar system. "What are they broadcasting?" "It appears to be the same psychological profiles and techniques they used on us, sir. They are sharing their methods with anyone who might be listening." The revelation hit Vexthara like a physical blow. The humans were not keeping their psychological warfare techniques secret. They were broadcasting them to the entire galaxy. Any species that received the transmissions would learn how to understand and influence alien minds. "They are changing the rules of warfare for everyone," he whispered. Dr. Chun's transmission continued. "We are sharing our research with any species willing to listen. We believe that understanding leads to peace, and peace leads to prosperity for all. The age of conquest through violence is ending. The age of cooperation through understanding is beginning." The journey back to the Krillian homeworld took 6 months. During that time, Vexthara watched his soldiers change. They began forming study groups to discuss philosophy and ethics. They started questioning orders and asking about the purpose of their missions. They became individuals instead of just soldiers. When the fleet finally arrived at the homeworld, Vexthara was summoned before the High Command. He expected to be court-martialed for his failure. Instead, he found himself in a room full of generals and admirals who looked just as confused and frightened as he felt. "Commander," the Supreme Marshal said, "tell us what happened at Earth." Vexthara told them everything. The psychological warfare, the impossible knowledge, the way the humans had turned his soldiers into thinking individuals. When he finished, the room was silent for a long time. "Sir," he concluded, "the humans have demonstrated an ability that threatens the foundation of our entire military system. They can make soldiers question their orders. They can make warriors refuse to fight. They can turn an invasion force into a philosophical discussion group." The Supreme Marshal nodded grimly. "We have been receiving similar reports from across the galaxy. The human transmissions are being received by dozens of species. Wars that have lasted for centuries are suddenly ending as enemy soldiers begin to understand each other." "What are your orders, sir?" "Earth is to be classified as a psychological hazard zone. No Krillian ship is to approach that system. Humans have developed something more dangerous than any weapon. They have learned how to make war itself obsolete." Years later, Vexthara found himself standing before a class of young cadets at the Galactic War Academy. He had been asked to tell them about the most terrifying campaign of his military career. The story of how a primitive species had defeated the mighty Krillian Empire without firing a shot. "The humans taught us something important," he told the cadets. "They showed us that the greatest weapon in the universe is not a gun or a bomb or a battleship. The greatest weapon is understanding. When you truly understand your enemy, when you see them as individuals with hopes and fears and dreams, it becomes almost impossible to hate them." One of the cadets raised his hand. "Sir, if understanding prevents war, how do we maintain military discipline?" Vexthara smiled sadly. "That is the question that is reshaping the entire galaxy, young one. The humans have made us realize that perhaps the real enemy was never other species. Perhaps the real enemy was our own ignorance and fear." He looked out the window at the stars beyond. Somewhere out there, the humans were still broadcasting their messages of understanding and empathy. Species across the galaxy were learning. to see their enemies as individuals rather than threats. The age of conquest is ending, Vexthara said. The humans made sure of that. They did not defeat us with superior technology or greater numbers. They defeated us by knowing us better than we knew ourselves. They weaponized empathy, and in doing so, they changed the course of galactic history. A final revelation came, in a personal message that Vexthara received years after the failed invasion. It was from Admiral Nancy Parker, now elderly, but still sharp. "Commander," she said, "I want you to know that studying your species taught us as much about ourselves as it did about you. We learned that the capacity for understanding is not unique to humans. Every species we encountered, including yours, had the same potential for empathy and connection. We simply helped you discover it." She paused, smiling gently. "The greatest terror is not that humans are psychologists on a galactic scale. The greatest terror is that every species has this same potential, and now they know it. The universe will never be the same." Vexthara closed the message and looked out at the stars. The humans had been right. The galaxy was changing. Wars were ending not through victory or defeat, but through understanding. Species that had been enemies for